Hey, thanks for joining us for our beef brunch news update for Tuesday, August 8th. Is that right? Sorry, for Tuesday, August 8th. We were just visiting a little bit before we got on about the heat and the weather, and I know the guys will touch on that a little bit, as well as our markets. So, Vince, I'm going to let you go ahead and get us started.
Well, as always, thank y'all for having me this week. Man, it's a summer like none other. It's we were talking earlier, like Ashley said before the start of the recording, and I think it'd be more pleasurable at the beach for somebody that doesn't like the beach. So it's hot, it's dry, and we've had some moderate rainfall in the last 2 to 3 weeks in the central part of the state, but it did some good for a while, and it's just the temperatures got so high and so hot. It dried out everything so much. We got a lot of question, that hay is going to be short. There's no question on that part of the management process moving forward. And here we are, August the 8th. We got people already preparing questioning ryegrass plantings and ordering seed. And I think some folks have been listening to us a little bit about getting things done in a timely fashion ahead of planting intentions, because we've been getting a lot of questions. But I will caution and warn, I've been hearing of a lot of armyworm outbreaks across the state. Fortunately, we haven't seen much of that in the central part. I mean, or have had many reports of it anyhow. But I talked to one gentleman down near Lake Charles yesterday, and he said that they had cut off some hay and fertilized it, and now they're, attack the armyworms. It just seems like they're eating it up as fast as it's growing. But and they got a rain event during the week last week, just one of these storms that popped up along this outer peripheries of this high pressure, and they got a 3/4 to an inch in some areas that really helped them out, and they got some fertilizer out. And but we got all the variables, it seems like, working against us. And we've had a lot of calls about baling rice straw. We're in the say, like the fella in the short rows of the rice harvest in central and south Louisiana. Um, Back 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot of rice straw baled, and we had smaller machinery. Nowadays, the machinery has gotten so big with straw choppers, and a lot of people using straw for management purposes, as far as organic matter and nutrient management strategies. But there are some people that are allowing cattle producers to go in and bale behind the harvesters, as far as baling some rice straw up. So the next big question comes on nutrient quality and availability through rice straw. And history has it, I recommended to 5 or 6 people in the last week or so, have it tested, so what you're up against as far as needing to put liquid feeds out, or tubs, or some sort of supplement. But it's like I told one, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So some of the early predictions of our winter forecast with El Nino in place is to be extremely cold and wet in South Louisiana, or in Louisiana in general. So I don't know if that's a fallacy of some sort, that people are just hoping and dreaming that this hot weather goes away, that we're going to have some cooler weather coming, but it will get here. But just if it's as extreme as some of the predictions are, it could be a quite cold event coming up this fall with a lack of hay. So I see a lot of trucks. I have a lot of friends in the business, and with through extension and also just friends in the business. Having been in the cow calf business for 30 years, a lot of discussion and phone calls and text of who's got what hay, and there's a lot of trucks being loaded and shipped around, not only within the state but out of state. So again, if you haven't met your hay intentions with whoever provides your hay source, it's time to get on the ball with that deal, because hay is short, and there will be no hay if this weather continues, which they're forecasting for another 10 days of this 100-degree temperatures. And when we know something, that we'll go from a bad summer into probably a cool fall quickly. So our normal dry period in September and October, we have minimal rainfall in those months. So hopefully that changes and we get some rainfall in between those two periods of summer and fall. But it's not looking real promising right now. I don't know, Lee's going to cover some of the marketing strategies and marketing situations But here at some of our local barns, I dropped off some of my personal yearlings yesterday that were just hanging around. We were feeding them around the place, and with a lack of shade, and I could see they were losing a little weight. So I said, let me go ahead and part with them. My trucks and trailers were lined up at the barn. I don't know if it was beating the heat of the day or if they were expecting a big run today. We'll know down at Kinder what those numbers are after today's sale. But I would anticipate Opelousas is going to be likewise tomorrow. So I think people are taking the precautions and making the move and get rid of some stock that they're having to feed. And there's a considerable amount of hay that's been fed already, and more to be fed. So it's not a promising situation moving into the fall. But as far as the market concerns are, the market's still favorable, and Leo shared some of that with us, I'm sure, in his findings of his weekly reports. But again, make those planting intentions known to your distributors. If you can book some fertilizer at a cheaper price, ask about it and see if you can get a little cost savings there. Even though the cuttings are short, cut what hay you can and get it baled up, because it's going to be a challenge moving into the fall and winter. So horn flies are still an issue. Herd bulls, I've mentioned this time and time again on this update. Keep your herd bulls where you can see them and check on them daily. Check your water sources, normal water bodies, canals or ponds that cattle normally go into to cool off and are getting bogged into. So they're drying up. Try to fence those areas off. I've seen a couple of areas where people typically have stock ponds that cattle get into. They have them hot wired off right now because the water's getting low and it's just mud. So makes a miserable situation for cows thinking they're going to cool off, and they're probably going in there to meet their last day. So take those precautions. Keep your bulls where you can see them. Give them shade and plenty of water, because it's critical right now, and it's been that way for the last 2 to 3 weeks, and we got at minimum another week ahead of us, and maybe more. We're just in early August, so August, September can be pretty brutal, but it don't seem like it can hardly get any worse as far as the weather we normally experience. I looked at a 30-day outlook of normals, and we normally 92 to 94 degrees, probably with a heat index around 98 to 99 this time of the year, and we're surpassing that by 10 digits. So we need to make sure that we're taking the precautions needed to keep the stock safe. And I know Dr. Ashley and I, well, before we started recording, had some calls about heat stress, and it's definitely a concern for most, not only for cattle but horses. I see a lot of horses out there with no cover, no shade. I know a horse is pretty tough and can take the heat, but this is pretty bad as far as moving forward, as what we've experienced and moving forward. So, Ashley, that's about all I have at this point. Army worms, we talked about army worms. It was the less of two evils. I don't know. Let them eat or try to get them out the grass. Or the forages that are left to be baled. I'm not sure that you're going to get an effective control putting it out as hot and dry. Any type of insecticide as hot and dry as it is right now. We're seeing grasshoppers. It's awfully dry when you see grasshoppers in South Central Louisiana, and it's not the major big grasshoppers, but it's they're still reaping havoc on our forages that are still available. So it's insects seem to be worse whenever we get in drought stress conditions, and hopefully there's some relief in sight.
Thank you. Yeah, so emphasize a couple of things that he said regarding the heat stress for livestock. Check your water sources, and I'm glad you mentioned them getting bogged down. A lot of people don't think about that. Once those, I would say tanks, once the ponds, it's my Texas lingo, sorry, but once the ponds start to get a little more shallow and just stay muddy, they can and will bog down in those, like Vince said. If you have to put up water sources or need to add more water sources, try to do it in the shade. If you're not sure if you have enough shade available, reach out to one of us. Let us come out and do a site visit and see what we can do for that. Try to minimize transportation if you can. I know we're going to talk markets, and we have been telling you to sell them if you need to, and we'll get into that later. But if it's just general transportation, try to minimize it unless you have to, or transport during the early mornings. Work them during the early mornings if you can. Lee, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for a North Louisiana update.
Thank you, Ashley and Vince. Glad to be with y'all here today. If you didn't get the message from those two, I'll just say it one more time just for your benefit. Folks, be careful on all these classes of livestock right now in this weather. Vince was talking about bogging cattle. We've seen some stock ponds uh, kind of go dry up in North Louisiana as well. We don't have near the bogging issues that a lot of areas have, but just on my personal place, I pasture I'm keeping my saddle horses in. Uh, it's got a pond that they traditionally water out of, a good pond, but it's kind of on the back side of the place. And I checked it the other day because, a dry period like this, you need to start checking those things. And it had gotten to an uncomfortable level, and so I had to shuffle some horses around just to avoid that. So it is a concern, folks. This isn't a typical summer, I would say. Uh, get back on course here. Dry is a word up here for sure, much as the way it is down in Vince's area and over Ashley's way. Um, Northeast Louisiana did pick up some spotted rain. I think that was last week, but talked to some friends and some contacts over that way, and I thought I thought should have got some, and they said no, it went around us, so it wasn't widespread by any stretch of imagination. It's dry, folks, and it's hot. Hot doesn't even cover it. Whenever you get these excessive heat warnings day in, day out on your phone, you start to ignore them to a certain degree because it's just the same song, just a different verse, so to speak. National Drought Monitor was released. If you've never looked into that, it's kind of interesting to see. Nobody looks at it during wet times, of course. So you go months without looking at the thing, and then this time of the year when we're in a drought, people start watching it because watching it religiously. Is released every Thursday morning. And if you need the link, you can message one of us, call one of us. We'll tell you what it is. It's easy enough to find. But the reason why it's so important is not only is it of interest to producers, especially in drought-stricken areas, but also a lot of governmental programs administered through the USDA, supplemental programs and so on and so forth, um, are tied to it, and you have to reach certain levels for a certain amount of time before assistance is garnered from it. And if you're in Louisiana, you know what I'm talking about because we've all been there and done that in times past. Um, the last Thursday's drought monitor, Sabine Parish is, if you want to talk about North Louisiana, and I guess you could almost consider Sabine to be kind of the southern border of North Louisiana, as far as our regions go. Sabine is the worst, folks, up our way. Sabine's in a D2 drought. It's a severe drought. Not all of it, but I talked to quite a few people down that way, and it is powerfully dry down there. Um, Parts of DeSoto and Natchitoches are a D1. That's what's considered a moderate drought. Portions of Wynn, Bienville, Jackson are all in a D0, which is considered abnormally dry. And all the points north of those parishes are pretty well out of drought as far as the drought monitor goes. But that doesn't mean it's not dry, folks, and that there aren't people in a bind. Hear more and more reports on people starting to feed hay, which I'm not going to hash over everything Ben said. I'm just going to say ditto to what he said about hay supplies, folks. It's that first cutting. Vince and I talked several times on these news updates about how poor yield was on first cutting, both in South Louisiana and in North Louisiana. And boy, that's biting us square in the rear end right now. And I feel like it's going to continue to bite us moving forward, as far as that goes. One of the differences is, you talk to somebody in DeSoto Parish or sure down in Sabine Parish, and it's not just talk, folks. I've seen pictures upon pictures of droughted out pastures, look like January the 1st, ate to bare ground, so to speak, and just terribly dry. And then you go right up the river. I visited with a friend of mine that's a producer in Caddo Parish, so right on up the Red River Valley. And he said, Lee, my grass is still growing just a little bit. Not 50 miles separates him from some of these areas, but that just goes to show you how varied the rainfall has been over the last couple of months, 3 months or so, throughout northern Louisiana. So it's dry. We're looking at we got some small rain chances, kind of some hit and miss thunderstorms chances tomorrow with a cold front. I say cold because it might drop the temperature tomorrow down into the mid to lower 90s. Then we're right back up, like Vince was stating about the long range forecast down in central to southern Louisiana. Much the same up here. They're going to pop us right back into the high 90s to the low 100s as we move forward. Pastures, like I said, they're just in pretty rough shape everywhere. The people that were able to grow some grass and grow some forage, they're holding out all right. The folks that have been dry the longest, of course, they just eat to nothing, so to speak. Um, Last time we had our news update report, I mentioned the National Cattle Inventory Report that the USDA releases. I was a little bit late in getting results from that, but I do have results from it. You probably heard it from some other sources, but if you hadn't, I'll just share that with you. I'm just got one headline on it. The report's quite in depth on a lot of different categories, but here's the whole point of it. Inventory as of July 31, 29.4 million head of beef cattle, 3% reduction from this time last year. And, back whenever they released the January 1 report or January 31 report, it was the lowest level of beef cattle since 1962. And we hadn't made any headway, folks. And the question I get asked all the time in regards to beef cattle markets is how long is it going to last? And for folks, I just don't know. I've talked at length about some, I think, on these market reports about factors that I look for, things that be watching. Folks, this inventory of cows is a super important component of knowing how long we can sustain a market. And folks, Louisiana just doesn't amount to much beef cattle production way in the grand scheme of things. Don't mince my words now. Beef cattle is a very important component of ag in Louisiana and a fairly large revenue generator for a lot of farmers and ranchers in Louisiana. But in the nation as a whole, states such as Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, so on and so forth, carry a lot more beef cattle than we are. But from Louisiana's vantage point, I see no signs of herd rebuilding. We're still, I would say, in contraction mode, so to speak. And I know that a lot of areas of the nation are still dry, such as us, and long way to climb. I know South Texas, Central Texas is still powerfully dry, and they've been that way for a couple of years now. So I don't know when we're going to see a turnaround on these inventory reports. That's a long-winded response to say I don't know when we're going to see a turnaround on them. Got the market report for this 2 week period. We record these news updates every 2 weeks, so it doesn't give the most up to date information. I compiled the information from last week, so that would have been July 31 through August the 5th. Last sales held last week. I made two changes, and I'll go on and talk about those. This is a work in progress, this market report, and I've talked at length about the challenges in kind of reading the tea leaves, so to speak, on markets in Louisiana because we don't have an official USDA market report for Louisiana. But still kind of tweaking this thing a little bit. One of the changes that I'm going to make that I've made is for bred cows. I'm not going to report the low end of the average, and the reason why is because the type data generated by the individual barns is so variable. Some barns generate reports and they just have cows sold by the head. Well, most of the times when you're selling cows by the head at a sale barn, that means they're bred cattle. If they weren't bred, they're probably going to be pounded out. But did a lot of looking and thinking on this, and that doesn't definitively mean that every cow sold by the head is a bred cow. So in the absence of that, I'm just going to report the top end averages. Um, you can sure give me some feedback if you want to, and I'll explain my process on this and whatnot, and I'll sure welcome any input moving forward. The other changes that I'm gonna that I made this week, and I'll get to those after I give the report. Try to give you a better state of the market in Louisiana, so to speak. So on 500 to 600 pound steers, the range of averages was $1.60 to $2.48 per pound, with the high sale mark being $2.53 per pound. On the heifer mates of those 5 to 6 weight heifers, $1.56 to $2.33, with the high sale being $2.40 per pound. Cull cows, wide variety, and I failed to mention, I guess I'll interject this now. I've got fairly high confidence in these numbers. I always try to tell y'all whether I believe in what I'm reporting or not. Had a quite a sufficient amount of data from the local barns as far as market reports. So on cull cows, it was widely variable, but the average was 71 cents per pound to $1.16 per pound. The high point being $1.19 per pound. Cull bulls, variable once again, same as cull cows, 93 cents per pound to $1.33 a pound. The high point being $1.40 per pound. On the bred cows, the average of the highs was $1,415 per head. The high point was $1,900 per head. That's on bred cows. Pairs, I will give you the lows and highs on that. Low average of the lows was $933 up to $1,760 was the average high on pairs. The high point on the sale on pairs was $2,400. Folks, just real quick interjection on this. I've been saying for a couple of months of these reports that I still think that these stock cows, replacement cows, are still somewhat of a bargain. But if you'll notice, if you'll go back and listen to some of these reports and look at these market reports that I've given, we're starting to see a creep up on these replacement cows. This drought conditions that we spent so much time talking about and hay shortages may head the market off a little bit, but it may not too. So I still think there's some bargains to be had. I had an opportunity to visit with friends down there at Red River Livestock the other day. I was out looking at some cattle down in that country and swung by on sale day and watched some pretty good replacement cows sell that should turn a profit, in my opinion. And so the final change that I made on the market reports is I went in and looked at the last market report that I compiled. That would have been 2 weeks ago, and I calculated percent changes. And I'm going to give you percent changes in the market from the last time I reported them. I'll give you that on the calves and on the cull cows and bulls. The replacement cows, stock cow market is so variable that I don't even feel like that I need to report percent changes, because as I've stated several times, one barn may run a real good herd sellout kind of deal of good quality young replacement cows, and it will skew the results so bad that I'm not going to report them. That being said, on the 5 to 6 weight steers, the market was a little over 5% higher this week over 2 weeks ago. On the heifers, 5 to 6 weight heifers, 2.1% higher over 2 weeks ago. Cull cows, 3.3% higher, and cull bulls, 4.6% higher. So higher across the board, folks, on those categories that I reported. And the final thing that I'm going to mention today, still not a lot of events or activities being held. There's some jackpot livestock shows, some horse events, whatnot, some rodeos, of course, going on across the state. But as far as our beef cattle educational programming, we don't have a lot of big events right now just because of how hot it is. but we have announced the dates for the pregnancy determination clinics that are going to be held at the Hill Farm Research Station in Homer. They're one-day events, and you're going to learn a multitude of things and management strategies related to determining pregnancy, including ultrasound and blood testing and rectal palpation. Just one-day events. We're going to have 2 of them coming up this October. They're going to be October the 3rd. That'll be a Tuesday, or October the 5th, which is a Thursday. And folks, it goes without saying, these things fill up and we have a waiting list every time. And I visited with Miss Kathy, the lady at the station that keeps track of such things, and we're almost full on one of the days and have a few spots left on the second day. So if you have any interest in learning this, please reach out to us and try to get your name and on the list, and we'll get you the registration information. But this is something that's requested a lot, and unfortunately, we have constraints about when we can have it. We try to have cattle in all stages, from opens all the way to 3rd trimesters. It takes about 90 head of cattle to sort through to get groups from each stage, and frankly, we just run out of cattle and run out of time. And so it's kind of a one time a year thing. We try to have 2 the same week just because of the stages of cattle, but we can't accommodate everybody. So if you want in, we sure want you to get in. That being said, Ashley, I think that's all I've got, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, sir. So I'll do markets, I guess, on my end really quick, and then we have some save the dates, I guess, going forward. Starting mid-September, we'll get pretty busy with our events. So for the markets ending August 4th, slaughter volumes in the 5-area feeding region for the past week were confirmed 68,640 head. That was down 6,136 head from 2 weeks previous, so that would have been July 21st. Choice box beef closed the week at $302.97. That was only down $1.07 compared to July 21st, with a choice select spread of $25.05, which was down $3.07 compared to 2 weeks ago. Adding to what Lee said on our 5 to 6 weight steers, mediums and large 1s and 2s. So again, my numbers are going to be an average between Oklahoma City and Mississippi. So those actually averaged 298, which was up 43 per hundredweight. So 298 per hundredweight, which is $43 increase compared to July 21st. So just looking at that, the reason for that, Oklahoma City reported pretty high prices. So they were at $351 for the week. But if you look at Mississippi, which stayed pretty on par with what Lee had a while ago for us in Louisiana, Mississippi reported an average of $245 for those 5 to 6 weight steers. 7 weight feeder steers, medium and large 1s and 2s, sold at an average of $231, which was up about $6 compared to 2 weeks ago. Our lean cull cows, those are your thin conditions, were at 98 cents a pound. Boning utility, we're at $1.07 a pound, and then breakers, your high conditioned, were at $1.08 a pound. Looking at the feedstuffs, again, everything's compared to 2 weeks ago, which would have been July 21st. Soybean meal was down $1.20 at $476.60 a ton. Soybean hulls were down $5 at $120 a ton. Rice bran was steady at $200 a ton. Cottonseed meal steady at $345 a ton. Whole cottonseed steady at $255 a ton. Corn gluten feed meal, the 60% was down $7 at $623 a ton. And then corn, it's a new crop prices still, was down 65 cents a bushel at $4.78 a bushel. DDGs, I believe it's Missouri is what I look at for those prices. They were not reported for this past week, but for the week of July 28th, they were at $232.50 a ton, which was up $29 a ton compared to July 21st. So looking forward at some of our events, Lee mentioned the cattle pregnancy determination clinics that we have. I do have information on that in there. And he mentioned all the cattle that are involved in us putting that event together. I get asked this all the time. That is only offered at the Hill Farm. We do not have cattle at the other research stations to be able to make that work. The next event that we have coming up, I believe, would be the Dean Lee Research Station Beef, Cattle, and Forage Field Day. That's going to be on Thursday, September 14th. I do have a link. Registration's free, but we need a head count for meals. So I have that registration link posted. The sign-in and trade show will begin at 2 on that Thursday. The following Thursday is going to be the Northeast Beef and Forage Field Day. That'll be in Mangum at the Gold Mine Plantation. That's going to be a morning event, and I'll get you all those details soon. Southeast Region Master Cattleman Program is currently accepting registrations. That's going to be held at the Tangipahoa Extension Center. It'll be on Monday nights from September 11th through November 13th. Registration for that's $200. You can contact the Tangipahoa Extension Office, and I've got that information listed in the descriptions. Mentioned the Pregnancy Determination Clinic October 3rd and 5th, and then October 18th through the 20th, it's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, is our Artificial Insemination School at the Dean Lee Research Station, an extension center in Alexandria. We'll get more information to y'all on that. We usually start at 9 in the morning and finish about 6 in the evening. Fridays, we wrap up a little bit earlier, just depending on how the exams go. And then that Saturday, October 21st, will be the Acadiana Fall Beef and Forage Field Day. That's going to be at the Iberia Research Station in Jeanerette. We usually start, I think, at like 8:30 or so, 8:30 in the morning on that Saturday. So we'll get you more information as we get closer to those events. If you have questions on any of them, you can always contact me. My contact information stays in the video and podcast descriptions, and I can send you to the right people for that. With that, we will see y'all again in just a couple of weeks.